Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. My name is Mark Roden, and in today's video we are going to be talking about how things you should do when going to buy a car. That's the best way of putting it. This isn't like a top 10. I just kind of separated it into little portions, and the reason why is because I've had this list on my phone for quite some time now, because every time I go to look at a car, I'd bring out the list, I check everything on my list on the car, and if it all checks out, I at least talk about buying the car. And so I've had it on my list, and I was like, you know, why don't I share it with my peeps? That guy was jamming in his Kia Soul, but like, why don't I share it with the YouTube folks? Because there's a lot of young guys on this channel, and there's a lot of older guys on this channel. So the thing is, right, older guys probably have a lot of experience buying cars. Younger guys probably don't. And if you're an older guy that doesn't have a lot of experience, or a younger guy that does have a lot of experience, that's fine too. I'm not judging. But I think it's a perfect little community, because what we could do, right, is I could go over my things, my tips and tricks on things to look out for, which I think I covered most of it. But if I miss any, then the older guys who have other tips can also leave it in the comments to help the younger guys, or the younger guys can ask questions for the older guys and be like, what about this? Should I look out for that? It's going to be great. It's going to be a great, grand old time, ladies and gentlemen. So we're driving the old Integra today. I'm taking the same route that I take almost every time. Sorry about that, guys, but I got to go down. This is like the only way for me to get down to the town that I live in, so I have to go this way. But yeah, like I said, I split it up into different categories. So we got things to bring, things to check when the car's parked, things to check underneath the car, and things to check when actually driving the car, taking the car for a test drive, and things like that. So let's get right into it. First up, let's talk about the things to bring. Now, obviously, this is a big one, the money. If you want to buy a car, you got to bring however much money you plan on buying the car for. It's a good rule of thumb to bring however much you guys agreed upon, but I have heard of some people that bring slightly less. That way they can be like, listen man, I only got this much, and try to like scam their way into like getting the car for less. I wouldn't recommend doing that, because a lot of the time, like, if me personally, if someone shows up to buy my car and I got it listed for $5,000 and they have $4,000, they're like, dude, I can only get $4,000, I'm gonna be like, well, tough shit, I don't know why you drove all the way out here if you didn't have the amount of money I was asking for. Go home. So I wouldn't really recommend doing that, but some people do that. So obviously bring the money, but obviously since you're bringing a lot of money, because cars are not cheap, you're going to want to bring some sort of protection, some sort of way to defend yourself. And the way I do it is honestly just by bringing people. If you have one or two friends with you, chances are they're not going to try to rob you, because it's just too much people. On top of that, look at the account. But this is going back to like before you even made the plans to go see the car. But if you use Facebook Marketplace, which most likely you do because everybody does, look at the guy's Facebook profile. You could tell a lot by a person's Facebook profile. If it looks like they are a reputable source, then you'll be fine. If it looks like it's some sketchy scam artist, then maybe just don't even go look at it in the first place. Or if you are going to go look at it, bring a protection. I have a friend, his name is John. I won't say his last name, but his name is John, and he has his pistol permit. So whenever I go look at a car, he comes along and brings his pistol just in case. It's a form of protection. I want to get a pistol permit for that reason myself too. It's just having that sort of protection. It's nice. You have a lot of money on you, you're going to want to protect yourself. But the next thing to bring is a flashlight. Obviously, you need a flashlight. Even if it's bright as day out, you're not going to be able to see everything underneath the car without a flashlight. Yes, you could use your phone. Phone flashlights are pretty good nowadays. I would still recommend just bringing a nice big old, like those gun flashlights. Bring one of those, because they're so much better than a phone flashlight. But obviously, for obvious reasons, you need a damn flashlight. And finally, the last thing to bring would be an OBD scanner. On top of that, another good one is, if you gotta be honest with yourself, if you don't know what you're looking at when it comes to cars, bring a mechanic. Maybe have the mechanic drive you out there. I know my friend John, like I said, he knows a lot about cars too, but also my dad, he's been a mechanic his whole life. So back when I didn't know what I was looking for, I would bring them along, and they would help me look for things that I might not be able to notice. You need at least the OBD scanner though, because an OBD scanner, they can hide a check engine light so easily. All you have to do to hide a check engine light, unplug the battery, plug the battery back in, the check engine light should be gone for a decent amount of time, enough time at least to sell a car as long as you don't drive it. And so they can very easily do that. Or they can even just go in there with an OBD scanner and clear the codes themselves. It's also that easy. You can just do that and it'll be gone for a couple of, like, I think it's like 500 miles before it pops back up. So yeah, just bring an OBD scanner. It'll find you things that they might be trying to hide. Now we're gonna go into things to check when parked though. It's really not that much that you need to bring to a car because there's not much that you need to bring, I guess. The things to check when parked, the first one is obvious. Oil, brake fluid, power steering fluid, transmission fluid, all the fluids. Check the damn fluids. The most important one is oil. I wish I could show you like an actual, like me checking my fluids right now to show you what like good fluids look like versus bad, but I'm driving, so I can't. But pretty much when it comes to oil, the darker it is, the more used it is. That's not to say the worse it is, because sometimes oil is just darker. It's just how it is. But it usually starts as like a darkish brown, okay? Like oil starts as like a dark brown. Once it gets blacker and blacker and blacker, it's more used. But what you're really looking out for really isn't even that anyway. It's mainly inconsistencies in the oil. If you got like the dipstick out of the car and there's little pieces of metal on it, that's awful. That's really bad. You don't want to buy that car because that means that it's wearing away the cylinder walls, or some metal out there is getting worn out, meaning that they probably had bad oil in it for quite some time, or the oil in it right now is bad, and this is not bad. It's a ticking time bomb if you do that. As far as transmission fluid, power steering fluid, brake fluid, again, you kind of got to look up all those guides to see what the right coloring is for those. Obviously coolant too matters, but for the most part you really want to pay attention to the oil, and the oil is relatively the easiest one to check anyway, so you should be good. But just make sure that there's no metals or any contaminants in that oil, because that could be very, very bad. Very, very bad. Next up is tires. This is obvious. This is easy. Just look at the damn tires, man. People, I think, stress too much about tread of tires when they first start with a car. They always are like, oh, but I don't know how to tell if the tread is good or not. It's very easy. Just look at it, man. Trust your gut. Does it look bad? You know what bad tires look like. Do the tires look bad? If they do, they're probably bad. That's not a deal breaker. You can always just buy new tires, but it's just something to look out for, you know? Next is idling RPM / how long the car actually takes to warm up. When I bought the Integra, it had a bad thermostat, and so it took the car, as you can see, it never warms up now because it takes the car very long to warm up, and because of the thermostat issues. On top of that, when it does warm up, where does it idle at? Most cars idle at 750 RPMs. That's a good rule of thumb. 750 RPMs is nice. My 350Z idled at 1500 RPMs because it was in limp mode. So things like that, you're gonna need to look out for. If it idles higher or lower, you need to know why. If it's idling low, that's very bad. It could stall out at any minute if it idles too low. If it idles too high, that's also very bad. The car's idling too high for a reason. You gotta check that stuff. Make sure it warms up in a decent amount of time, because if it takes too long for the car to warm up, there's another problem sitting there. Make sure that the guy before you, like the guy that's selling the car, didn't warm the car up before you got there, because that could be a red flag right there that he's trying to hide something. Make sure that it's cold when you get there, and then you should be fine. Next up are some obvious ones. Windows. Check the windows, make sure they work. My Integra's driver's side window has not worked the entire time I got it. I thought I fixed it, I did not. There's a bad connection in here somewhere, and it's been annoying. Next is heat and AC. Obviously you want heat and AC. If you don't really care, it's no big deal. I mean, I didn't have AC in my PT Cruiser, I didn't have it in my 350Z, I have it in this car, but I didn't have it in those two cars, and it wasn't the end of the world. It was just kind of annoying. But if you want heat and AC, you got to make sure that those work. On top of that, if it doesn't have heat, that could be a wiring issue, because most of the time heater cores, they can go bad, but a lot of times it's because there's a bad connection. And so if it's got a bad connection in the heater core, probably has a bad connection somewhere else too. And wiring can be a big pain in the ass. So make sure that those work. Same with radio. I guess, again, if you don't really care if you have a radio, then this doesn't really affect you, but the same thing applies with the heater core. If it has bad connections in the radio, there's a good chance it has bad connections somewhere else. And so just make sure that the radio works if you care about that stuff. Also, just check the speakers. If speakers are blowing, that can be annoying. It's a kind of expensive fix, honestly. So power seats too, if the car does have power seats. This car doesn't. My 350Z did, and the passenger power seat never worked. It never bothered me. I never even fixed it, because who really cares? It's a two-seater car. The guy in the passenger seat could deal with it. But if you have like a coupe or something and it needs a power seat for people to get in the back, and that power seat doesn't work and people can't get in the back, that could be very annoying. Most of the time it's just a sensor, but still, that's an annoying little fix to check. Next is a big one, and this is something that you really, really want to check. We'll go over the small ones first, though, actually, really quick, just to get them out of the way. Headliner. Is the headliner dirty? Is it filthy? If it is, Why? Is it because I've seen a lot of coupes with fingerprints on the headliner, and that's obvious because they're getting in and out of the back of the car, so they have to put their hands on the roof and stuff like that. That would make sense. But if there's if the headliner is like sagging, or if it looks like it's not lined up, the chances are they took it off for a reason. And why did they take that off? Was it in an accident and they needed to replace the headliner? Was the headliner cracked? There's a lot of stuff that you could tell with a car's interior, and a headliner is a perfect way to tell that. If the headliner is all destroyed and they didn't care about the headliner, chances are they don't care about the rest of the car. And the next thing is no cracks in the dash, whether that's the dashboard or the windshield. Just make sure there's no cracks up in here, okay, up in this area. A lot of S chassis have a tendency to crack dashes. My PT Cruiser had a cracked dash. There's a lot of cracked dashes, and you might think, oh, well, it's not going to bother me. It will bother you, and if it does bother you, it's a really expensive, very hard to replace part to the car, so that's a big problem. But the big thing to check when you're parked on the car is panel alignment. Oh my God, I feel like this is so underrated to check when you're looking at a car. Run your finger where a fender and a bumper meets, okay? There's a little gap there. Run your finger across that gap on one side, go to the other side and run your finger across the gap on that side too. Is it the same? Is the width the same? Does it remain the same throughout? Look at pictures of the car when it's stock. Look at pictures online of when it's stock. Do the fender gaps, do those gaps in the panels line up? If they don't, then that means it was in an accident, or the person put some aftermarket part on there for some reason and he didn't line it up correctly. It's very hard for a human being to get a car's panels to line up exactly how the factory wanted it to. So that's usually a telltale sign that there's been an accident, or that there's been some sort of messing around with whatever panel that is before you. And that's obviously a big deal, because if the panels aren't lining up, it could be frame damage. It could just be that the guy got into a fender bender and he replaced the back bumper, and it's no big deal. Who cares? But it's still something to look out for and to definitely keep your eye on. That's a very big red flag if the panels aren't lining up correctly. Again, they should be even on each side. So if they're not even, or if they're not even throughout the car, and if you just notice that something's off there, there's a problem there, look into it. Make sure that the car is met in an accident. Obviously, I'm assuming at this point you've already checked the Carfax, and I know you probably have a false sense of confidence going in because, oh, the Carfax said there's no accidents. The Carfax isn't always right. You don't have to they always take things from insurance companies or mechanic shops that pay Carfax. Not all mechanic shops pay Carfax, and not all insurance companies report it to Carfax. There are some times where not everybody reports their accidents to insurance in general. I crashed the PT Cruiser in a snowy day and there was no one around. I hit a guardrail. I just drove back home. It damaged the crap out of the freaking fender. That's why I had that gold fender. Remember that gold fender on the PT Cruiser? That's why I had it, because it damaged the fender when I hit the guardrail, so I had to replace the fender. But I never reported that. There's no accidents on record of that PT Cruiser, but it wasn't an accident. So again, never trust the Carfax and go in with a false sense of confidence. Make sure those panels line up. Things like this, like this Subaru, the trunk has part of its taillight on the trunk. So that means that taillight will move when you open up the trunk. So make sure that those taillights line up with the taillights that's on the actual body of the car, because if it's like a little bit higher, well, that's obviously not how it's supposed to sit. As a matter of fact, that Subaru itself kind of looks like that. It kind of looks like it's not sitting where it's supposed to. So yeah, just check panels, man. Make sure those panels. But now let's go into things to check when you're actually underneath the car. Something that you can check when the car's parked again, obviously, unless you're a oh my God, unless you're a daredevil and want to hang out with the car while it's driving and check underneath it. First up is rust. I mean, this is obvious. It's super obvious. If you live in Florida, you probably don't even know what this word means. If you live in California, you probably don't know what this word means. But if you live anywhere else, you know to check for rust. It is a deal breaker. Rust is car cancer. It can kill the car. Surface rust, not that big a deal. Every car is going to have some surface rust. You could find a 40,000 mile brand new 2022 car, it's going to have some surface rust, things like on the muffler and things like that. It's not the biggest deal. You can always reverse that too if you want before it starts to rot. But that's what you're really looking out for, is rot. Is there rot holes in the car? A lot of trucks tend to rot. Their beds tend to rot like crazy. Their rocker arms tend to rot like crazy. You got to check those things. If there's rust underneath the car, it's on the end of its, if you get, like, let's say you get a Lexus IS300, okay? IS300s are really reliable cars. It could have 200,000 miles in it and still have another 100,000 miles left in the clock before it decides to poop the bed. But if you look underneath the car and it's rusted to dookie, then it's only a matter of time before that thing starts to fall apart, and it's a deal breaker. So anyway, next is leaks. Check the back of the engine, check the oil pan, check the transmission. Just check things that hold fluids in them, and make sure that there's no fluids coming out of them, because that's not what they're supposed to do. Obviously, if they're trying to hold it in and they're coming out, that's the opposite. That's the opposite, partner. The reason why you want to check the back of the engine mainly too is because of something called a rear main seal. Rear main seals like to go in a lot of cars for God knows what reason. They just tend to go, and if they do, they're a very annoying fix. They're not like super bad. I wouldn't say like they're a super expensive or time. They are time consuming, and that's kind of the reason why they're annoying. But they're just such a pain to fix. I had to fix my friend Integra, actually. My friend Bailey, he has an Integra, and I didn't have to fix it for him. I was just kind of helping him, but I was there and I was helping, and it was a pain. It was a pain in my arse to fix that thing with him. It wasn't fun. And rear main seals do tend to go. Oil pans are obvious. Lowered cars especially will have some cracked oil pans here and there. If it's a lower oil pan and it's just like the cover to the oil pan, that's not really that big of a deal. I mean, I replaced the oil pan on my 350Z. It cost me 30 bucks, and it was literally like 5 bolts and some like epoxy to make like a gasket, pretty much, because I didn't buy the gasket. And that was pretty much it. It was super simple, but it's still something to look out for. Oil and transmission fluids and power steering fluids, all that stuff leaking, it's just not good. If it's a line, it's a big problem. If it's just a reservoir, it's not that big a deal, but still not something you want to fix. But anyway, next thing to check when you're underneath the car is the pinch welds. The pinch welds matter quite a bit, because any experienced mechanic will know that when they lift a car up onto a jack stand, onto a lift, whatever it is, to do it by the pinch welds. But inexperienced mechanics don't know that. I have seen so many videos of people literally lifting their cars up off the side skirt, and then the side skirt crumples underneath the car, because that's obviously not what you're supposed to freaking lift it up by, and they're like, oh, I don't know how that happened, because you're lifting it up the wrong way. You're supposed to lift it up by the pinch welds. Now what are pinch welds? Well, I need pretty much like right behind the front tire and right in front of the rear tire, there's these little parts on the frame of the car that you could tell they just look like they're meant to be, they're supposed to be lifted up there. Those are pinch welds. Though my voice just cracked so bad because I'm like having trouble for air right now. I don't know what's going on. I think I'm in like a spaceship. But those are pinch welds. Check them. If they look like they've been worn, not too badly, but if they look like they've been used, that's a good sign. If it looks like everything else underneath the car hasn't been used to lift the car up, that's a good sign. Because if it's just basic knowledge to lift a car up by the pinch welds. Now there are some exceptions. I mean, I've seen people lift cars up by like different pieces of the suspension that they know are going to be okay, and I wouldn't personally recommend doing that, but they've done it and it's worked. Lowered cars, a lot of the time they have these these bumpers in the back that are so that they can lift the car up that way, because their cars are too low to get a jack underneath it, and so sometimes they won't even use them. So that's fine too. But there's obviously pinch welds are a number one thing to check though. And then the final thing to check while you're underneath the car is the frame itself. It's the easiest way to check it, except for through the hood if you want to check the front of it. But if you're checking the rear of the frame, you got to go underneath the car, unless you want to take out all the interior pieces or the back bumper and take off all that stuff to see there. But if you don't want to do that, which you probably don't, then check, my car starts so bad on hills, but then check the whoa buddy, calm down. But then check the check underneath it. And obviously the reason why you're checking for frame damage is because you don't want frame damage. You don't, if it's frame damage, the structural integrity of the vehicle is damaged. So if you get into an accident, you're dead. You're dead. You will not survive. Okay? Not really. I mean, it's obviously a big deal, and you want to look out for it, but it's not as scary as some people make it out to you. But one thing that does happen, my friend had this happen to him, is he bought a car by a fly-by-night dealer. If you don't know what that is, look it up. But he bought his car by a fly-by-night, and they were all like, oh yeah, it needs an alignment, that's it. So he brought it to get an alignment, it didn't fix the issue. He brought it to get another alignment, it didn't fix the issue. Kept trying to get these alignments, replacing suspension pieces, and wouldn't fix the issue. Well, the reason ended up being that the car was not aligned because the frame was so damaged from an accident that they didn't tell him about, because they bought it from Copart. That's what a lot of those fly-by-night dealers do. They buy a damaged car off Copart, fix it up, and then sell it to some idiot who doesn't know how to check the frames. Don't be the idiot that doesn't check the frame, okay? Make sure you're the smart guy that can go up to him and be like, oh, I don't want this car, it's obviously been in an accident. And then when they're like, no, it's not, look at the Carfax. You could be like, I don't need to look at the Carfax because I have eyeballs and I can see that the frame is freaking bent beyond repair. The frame looks like the letter C. It's not supposed to look like the letter C. And then you're good. You're safe. You're safe and sound. You just saved yourself thousands of dollars. and you didn't buy a car with frame damage. Good job, man. But the last thing is obviously driving the car. Now I can actually kind of show you this because I am in a car driving. First up is obviously how does the transmission shift. If it's manual, it should be able to shift nice and smoothly like this. Ready? Ooh, yeah, you like that? Like that, nice and smooth, in and out of gears, no grinding noises, nothing like that. It's perfectly fine, doesn't slip out of gear. It's perfectly a-okay. And then that's a good transmission. That's a healthy transmission right there, partner, for a manual. But automatics are get a little bit more intense because there's so much computers trying to help them out, even if they are slightly broken. But there's it's quite simple, really. I obviously can't show you because I'm not driving an automatic right now, but it really is. I mean, when you put it in reverse, does it sound like it clunks, or does it sound like it just goes in reverse? Does it go into gear when you're driving it? And you could every car you can kind of feel it shift. Newer cars actually are good at hiding it. It's almost hard to tell when cars are shifting in a new automatic, but still, you could for the most part hear it shift. And so I'm already at 20 minutes, but this is an educational video. It's gonna be a long one. But yeah, is it just how check out the transmission shift. It's pretty easy. Next is let go of the wheel at 60 miles per hour. All problems start to happen around 60 miles per hour. Brakes, wheel bearings, any sort of other suspension issues, they're gonna start to shake and squeal and rumble at 60 miles an hour. So make sure when you take it on a test drive, you take it somewhere where you can go 60 miles an hour and just let go of the wheel. Does the wheel pull to the right? Does the wheel pull to the left? Does the wheel shake like crazy? There's probably a suspension problem with the car. So make sure that you do that. Then I didn't even mean to go in this way. I meant to turn left. Oh, silly me. But anyway, next thing, oh God, yeah, I really didn't want to turn in here because this place has craters. Oh God, ready? Oh God, oh. Next thing is the brakes, obviously. That kind of rubs into the other one, so I'm actually not going to talk about that because that's very, that runs into checking it when it's at 60 miles an hour. But the next thing is lights. That's interior and exterior lights. Do they work? Interior lights don't really matter. I mean, if it's not that big of a deal, but obviously the exterior lights do. I guess you kind of got to check this when you're parked, to be honest, but, yeah, do the high beams work? Do the low beams work? Do the brake lights work? Do the running brake lights work? Do the stopping brake lights work? Actual brake lights work? Does reverse lights work? Do the license plates lights work? Does the third brake light work? You gotta check all that stuff, okay? If it does, you're golden. Most of the time they will, but if it doesn't, it's a fix you gotta worry about. And finally, when you're actually driving the car, you wanna run over bumps. I know I'm recommending running over bumps and possibly injuring your, suspension, but it's not your car yet, okay? And here's the thing, it's gonna save you so much money if you run over some bumps now and realize, oh wow, this car has tons of suspension issues, rather than if you don't run over bumps now thinking, oh well if I buy this car and I don't run over bumps right now, it'll help me out in the long run. No, because then what if you buy it and the other idiot before you were taking it off-roading, was jumping it off a freaking, took a slammed Subaru BRZ and took it into a rally stage. You don't know. And so you gotta run it over some bumps, baby. The guy might get mad at you, but that's too damn bad. Tell him to suck it up. My GoPro actually died because I was recording for so long. That's weird. It was a 100% battery. So I'm actually recording the outro on my phone here, sitting in the parking lot. God, look at the little red spot on my head from the GoPro. But yeah, I'm recording the outro now. But yeah, that's it. That was the last thing to talk about anyway. Again, I highly recommend, if you're an older gentleman, to leave some tips below for the younger gentleman. And if you are a younger gentleman, ask some questions. We'll help you out, man. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. Das Vidania, and have a nice night.